Alright, I'm demonstrating today how to start off your Teneriffe lace with a hole in the middle. There are several reasons why you would want to do this. Our typical Teneriffe lace, all the threads cross in the middle, so you end up with a little bump there, and it's very decorative, but there may be instances where you would rather have the hole in the middle. It not only gives it a different look, but it could serve a purpose. For instance, I'm learning how to make these ring pin cushions, and I wanted to use my Teneriffe lace in the middle there just to kind of add a little lacy effect to it. But the bump in the middle was causing me some issues when I got ready to glue everything together. So this is to me a really neat way to start off your Teneriffe lace medallions. I'm going to put a link to the So Blessed class playlist, and there's several videos that I keep adding to that playlist, and one of them refers to ways to get your free patterns, and it tells you how to print up a circular graft with however many spokes that you want on it, and that way you can create your own patterns. If you attended our class, you would have already received a little pincushion loom, and you would have received this 36 spoke pattern. This is the pattern that we used for our class. And on the demonstration that I'm doing today, I'm using the green line, and I measured out 1 inch from the center. The radius was 1 inch, so I had a 2-inch diameter circle that I was playing with. But another reason why you would want to use this technique that we're talking about today is if you're making tiny flowers, and if you try to make a little tiny flower, these spokes get closer and closer together as you get close to the center, and as the circle grows, the spokes are farther apart. So in order to have a small flower, you would end up with such a thick bump in the middle unless you decided to go ahead and weave on half the number, or every other pin rather than all the pins. That's another way that you could do that. But this would be a great way to solve that problem of there being too many threads meeting in the middle. So let's get to it. All right, I've got the Technique of Teneriffe Lace book on my iPad, and the page that I'm looking for is around page 84 on the digital version, but the actual page number as far as the table of contents is 83. So whatever app you're using, just figure out where to find it, and it's down here with a little diagram showing how this hole is going to be made. And she has a description on where to place your thread according to this diagram, but I don't usually use the numbers like that, so we'll get right to it in the way that I've worked out for myself. All right, I'm going to thread my needle. I'm using a tatting needle. I believe it's a size 5. And I just want to bring this tail through to the back. This is my favorite way of securing my thread for this type of a loom. And my loom has been used quite a bit, so the hole is pretty easy for me to push through. So once I get it through to the back, I'm going to take the needle off and then wind it around a pin at the top, and then just push that pin down. And then I want to pull on this thread and make sure it's nice and secure. Alright, so I've got my loom marked with some pins on the north and south. You can mark your loom to keep track of where you're going. I've got my pins on the green line on my loom, and it's about 2 inches diameter. Alright, so I'm going to go clockwise around that top pin from left to right. I'm going to go straight down to the pin that we normally would wrap around, but then I'm going to go to the right and choose that one instead. So what we're doing, instead of crossing our thread straight through the middle, we're offsetting it by 1 pin. So to find my place, I'm going to turn my loom and go straight across, following this line straight across, and I'm not going to choose that pin. I'm going to choose the one to the left pin. Going to go straight down, not choose that pin, skip back to the right pin. So on the bottom I'm going to choose the right pin, and on the top I'm going to choose the left pin. I'm going to follow that line straight across, choose the left pin. And notice I'm not winding my thread around like that to where there's a twist. I am winding the thread still like we did before, going clockwise around the pin. If you're looking down at the top of the pin, it's clockwise. So we got a lot of left and right going on here, so it's kind of hard to describe. Going straight down and choosing the right pin. Going straight up and choosing the left pin. I almost did that wrong. Straight down and the right pin. Straight up and the left pin. And we are going to the left side of the pin, so that's kind of easy to remember which way to wrap the pin. Straight down, choosing the right pin to the right of it. Straight up, skipping back to the left pin. Straight down, skipping back to the right pin. Up and left, down and right. I have to keep chanting so I can remember where I am. Up and left, down and right, up and left, down and right, up and left, down and right. And see, we're leaving a little hole here, and you want to make sure this stays centralized. I'm kind of using, there's a little red line in there. I'm kind of using that as a guide. So up and left, down and right. Up and left, down and right. Up and left, and now we're filling in, down and right. Gets a little more obvious now. Up and left, down and right. Up and left, down and right. Oops, I went around 2 pins over here. They do want to grab more than I want them to. Right, it looks like I have covered all of my pins, so I'm temporarily going to take this tail and wrap it around a pin and secure it so that I can measure out the amount of thread that I want to use for my project. Alright, you should not have cut your thread yet. I still have my thread attached to the ball of yarn, so I'm going to measure out a couple of arm lengths because that's comfortable for me to use, and it's probably plenty for this project. And then I am going to cut that from the ball of yarn and then thread up my needle. And if you were in the class, all of this should be familiar to you. Alright, my needle is threaded, it's ready to go, and I'm still going to leave this anchored so I can kind of determine where I want to start. So since my thread is coming out down here, I'm going to decide to start, sorry about getting off the camera there, I'm going to start here in this area. So I'm going to release the pin that's anchoring my working thread. I still have this original thread. I still have it anchored, the one that's coming out through the back. I've not released that one yet. Alright, so my pin is here at the, I've got my loom upside down because this is the direction I'm going to go. So I'm going to take a note of where I'm going to start, and I forgot to put my pins down. So let me do that real quick. You definitely want to put these pins down. Sorry, I was jumping ahead. So let me pause the video and I'll be right back. Alright, I've got all my pins pushed down. I've got this center well defined here and pretty well centered as best as I can. This is where my thread ended up, on this pin that's to the right of my marked pin. And see if I can zoom in a little bit more. I tend to get off the camera if I zoom in too much. Alright, so I'm just going to kind of put a little tension on this thread, and I want to start in between these two threads that are on this marked pin. So I'm going to scoop as far down as I can, down in the middle, making sure I grab all of that bunch of thread that's going on in there, and I want to come up between those two threads that I chose to be my first. And what we're going to be doing is sewing around and around and around to secure this center. It's pretty easy right at first, but later on it gets really tight. So you may, when I get to the end of it, I'll kind of show you what I do to help get my pin over those threads there. So I'm going to go down in the center again, and I can tell where I left off because my working yarn is between those two threads. So I'm going to scoop down, go to the next pair, and you see I'm trying to make sure that my pin is coming up between those threads. And again, later on it's going to get kind of hard to pull that needle all the way through. So what I usually do, if I'm having trouble getting the pin up above those threads, I'll take another pin and I'll lift up on the end of that needle and shove it through. So hopefully when I get to the end I can show you how tight it really becomes. It's not hard, it's just that you have to be sure that you're securing this whole center. And just about every stitch I go in there and I make sure that center is still where it needs to be. So I can tell where I left off. I came between these two. So I'm going to go on to the next two, and you have to get through the whole bundle and come up in that little clean area where there's a V. And I can use my pin to help me get my needle up and over. And all I'm doing is whip stitching around the center to secure that. So I'm going to get a little bit farther down the line, and I'll come back when I get closer to the end. Alright, I don't have very much farther to go, so I thought I'd jump back in here. So my next one is this one right here. So what helps me to get my pin or my needle up and over those threads is I aim for that pin, and when I bump up into the pin it wants to deflect my needle, and it kind of helps me jump over those threads. Or you can use a pin like I showed you before. So I'm pulling these pretty tight, and I am going in here and making sure that I'm not distorting anything. And it wants to distort on you just about the whole time, so keep an eye on that. Just trying to figure out where I'm going here. So the next one is this pin right here, so I'm going to go and bump that pin, and it deflected my needle upwards. So it helps me jump over that thread. I think I have a little knot. I hear it popping through there. Alright. Bump up against that pin. And I think I have one more to go. And this was my beginning one. It's a little bit kind of closed in because of that thread going toward the back. So use a pin if you need to help you get between those two there. So I am done with this, but I'm going to go back through to where I come out between the first one, and then we'll get ready to weave whatever pattern we want to do. Now that one does not want to pop up because it is so tight, so I'm going to push down on the back part and kind of lever that up and over. Alright, there you have it, and you have a nice little hole in the middle that you can use as the securing the center of your design. At this point the center is secure, so you can go on and start weaving your project in whatever stitches that you want to do. So you don't have to do darning unless you want to do some darning around the edge for a certain pattern, but at this point the center is secure. I think that if you were going to take this off the loom and leave these as fringes, I would tie a round of knots around the center and then take it off the loom and leave the fringes loose. So that would be the only case that I think that you would need a little bit extra securing on the center.